And welcome to another Grafana Office Hours. Today we have a lot of people on the call that are very important. There's me, Nicole van der Hoeven, as usual. I'm a developer advocate at Grafana Labs, and my cohort here.
Paul Balogh. Yeah. Make sure it's on the right Brady Bunch square, right?
Yeah,
Paul
yeah.
Balogh. I'm another developer advocate here at Grafana Labs.
And today we have some special guests from Govable.ai, and that is Ari Hershowitz and Andrii Kovalov. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hello, hello.
Would you like to introduce yourselves a little bit? What do you do at Govable?
Sure. Well, I'll start. I'm the CEO of Govable. We consult with governments, legislatures in particular, on modernizing their stack, so improving how they process bills and laws. We work on natural language processing solutions so that governments can better understand what is in all of that legislation that they're working on and trying to pass. And we have a team of developers, and we sort of combine the work that we do with talk. I'm a lawyer originally, so I talk to the folks in government. How are you working with this data? How do you need this information? And then we put together a team to structure the information as data and present it in a sort of more understandable way.
That's awesome. I
Yep.
didn't know that you were a lawyer. Very perfect for the role that you have. So I guess
Yeah.
you kind of have to you're translating some legalese basically into figures that people understand, I guess.
That's right. And a lot of what we do is to try and help folks who are working with laws, other lawyers, to know what you can do with technology. Because sometimes people think that the hard things are easy and they think the easy things are hard. So we try to sort of balance their expectations.
Awesome. How about you, Andrii?
Yeah.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrii Kovalov. I'm a Python developer at Govable. Um, my main responsibility developing, testing, designing our custom ETL pipeline solutions. I'm also on a pager duty for stuff like that. So I'm a first person you take on GitHub issue where something missing or go wrong. So yeah, very interesting domain, and working with that, very cool.
Yeah. And I had to ask, how's the weather there in Pawnee, Indiana? That background looks somewhat familiar. I don't know. Is Ron Swanson around?
Yeah, that's very good picture. Very nice icebreaker. Multiple times it's saved us from awkward silence.
Right.
And it is instant topic for conversation.
Yeah.
And it works with our theme of government.
It
Yeah.
does. Very much so. Ties right in. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it's very appropriate. So, Ari, you kind of already talked a little bit about Govable, but maybe we can dig into that a little bit more. So, Paul and I are both from like a different industry altogether. So, could you give us like a bit more of an understanding of what the problem is? Like, why do you need to modernize government documents in the first place?
Sure. So the basic challenge is that for hundreds of years, government documents and legal documents in general have been developed and processed and communicated on paper, right? And paper is a pretty good medium. It's had a really awesome run, and we're still using it. And for some things, paper is just much better still than digital, right? So if you want to underline something and show it to somebody, well, yeah, there are annotation applications, but you'd have to send them there. But if you just take a piece of paper and you underline it, you can show them what you're trying to emphasize. And for lawyers particularly, this is true because there's been a whole system of references and citations that have been created in the law, where you know which book to go to, what page to go to in the book, and then you know, all of your knowledge graph is created through these citations. And there is some natural translation to the web if you use URLs, but a lot of government data has not been translated in that way. So you have basically a PDF of a document. You have the citation that still points to a page in a book, but you don't have the book. So a lot of what we're doing is helping to translate all of these paper documents into a data format that works for the web, and then also builds tools on top of that to visualize, to translate, to communicate between sections. Just to give you a very basic example, there's no place on the web right now that you can get the current official version of the United States law. The reason is because the government is, as soon as a new law gets passed by Congress, the government's always behind in integrating that into the previous law. So every time they pass a new law, we're behind. And then the new law on top of that gets you further behind. Exactly, Paul. It's a change management problem. And so part of what we need to do is to be able to give them a good change management solution, and then also to allow them to visualize that change over time. And again, the paper solution for this is for every paragraph that got changed, there's a set of notes below it that has dates associated with it. So the latest change was 2021, and you see a note with exactly the text change that went in 2020, but then you have to read and interpret backwards. So you basically undo all the changes in your mind by reading all these notes backwards in the list.
It reminds me a little bit of German. I don't know if either of you speaks German, but they have, because of the word order, sometimes the not is in the last part. So you can say, I want to something, something not. And you have to read the entire thing because it could change everything else. That's
a great example. And in legal language in general, you have to, context is super important. I think that's what you're pointing out. And one of the things that's lost if you just throw up all the text onto the web is that context. So again, another example, a bill is going to change a law, and the bill says in section 403 of the law, strike the word not and insert the word will. And you're like, not what?
Oh, great.
Will what? So part of our job is to find that reference, pull it out, show you where it goes, and show you what the change would be.
So it does strike me, though, as very similar. I mean, obviously, I have, my software development hat on, and I'm thinking of laws as something that you could maybe just version control.
Yeah.
We have solved for this problem already. Why isn't modernizing government documents why doesn't it involve maybe version controlling those laws, so you can also be able to like get blame and see who changed the law and when and what it referred to, and still have a history?
So that's a super question. And every few years, I think the developer community gets, when they focus on the law, because a lot of times there are laws that come out, copyright laws or something that are going to affect technology. Now they're going to be AI regulation. So people start looking at the law and they say, my goodness, I can solve this just by putting it all in Git. And you're right that some kind of version control is the right answer. And I have actually a YouTube video from a presentation I did at a Git satellite conference, GitHub satellite conference, talking about why Git and GitHub don't quite match the legal problem. And if you'll allow me, I'll explain why. So for one, Legal text is structured and not line-based. So you do a git diff, and that works pretty nicely if your changes are line-based and on single lines. But even within code, you know that if you do a git diff and you've refactored, you often get a pretty useless diff. You get a large insertion or a large deletion of what you had before and a large insertion, and you say, yeah, I know that I replaced things, but where did they all go? So that's one of the things. So you have to follow the structure of this section moves to this other section. This subsection moves to this other section. That's one of them. The other one that lawyers make really challenging and is that they had their own kind of version control system. They have their own kind of version control. If you think about a document that you're writing and then you send an email to somebody saying what changes you want in the document, what you'll typically do, if you're organized, I guess, like me, and I'm assuming you guys are, is you'll have bullet points and you'll say, okay, in section 3, I'd like you, the tone is a little off. I'd like you to make it more neutral. In section 4, I'd like you to strike these words and I'd like you to insert those. So you've got a list of the changes, like I'd mentioned before. That's closer to a patch than a new version. So you rarely have a full new version of the law to work with. You just have all of these patches on patches. And so whatever version control system you have needs to deal with this patching mechanism. Does that make sense? So it can't be direct. I guess what I'm saying is that Git directly won't work because Git makes the assumption that the new version is a complete replacement of the previous version. And then it looks for what the delta is, what changes are. What we have is only the deltas on top and sometimes a replacement. So you first need to apply that delta to create a new version. And often the way that's done is by a bunch of lawyers in the office will read the delta, will make that markup and create a new version. But so you have this problem of how do you store how do you apply all the changes? How do you store them? And then how do you visualize them? Because again, you no longer have that nice list for each paragraph that says, here were the changes. How do you tell a lawyer this law was true in January, but in December it was different? Right. So
what about, and we didn't talk about this before. It's just occurring to me as I'm talking to you. Is it totally out of the realms of possibility or a silly thing to maybe consider blockchain technology for this? Because it seems like, I know the primary use case for blockchain right now is currency, but it's really just, scratching the surface of it. In its essence, it is a ledger that you can use to keep track of changes without removing those older versions and being able to tie them specifically to certain dates or events, and everyone would see it.
Yeah, I kind of even think about it as like event streaming. Like with Kafka, you start off with the original thing, and then you keep applying these patches come in, and then you can always go back in time and recreate. Oh yeah, this is what the document was back in
That's
January.
right.
That type of a thing by replaying those events, those change events.
That's exactly right. And I think, Nicole, you're on the right track, but I don't think there are things that are solved. The solved part is we have the original documents and we have all of the patches, and it's not blockchain. Like, we don't have blockchain, but I don't think we need it because these are highly public documents. So there's sort of security by openness. The law was passed yesterday and everybody knows it, and the New York Times published it, and the Washington. So all these laws are available. What isn't available is the application of the laws to the previous document. So you need a team of people to do that and then store that version. And you need some assurance that the people who did that are qualified to do it and to understand what the words are. But then even the hardest problem, and this is where we'll get to Grafana and the usefulness of the kinds of tools you provide, is that if you have just a stack of these papers, how do you find the one you want? And how do you know, let's say I want to know out of this stack of papers, which one changed in December. It's more of a discovery and visualization problem. If I sent you to some of the current official government websites that show the United States Code, they're 15 years old or 20 years old. Their search is on an older version of Solar, say, so even the search is not great. There's a bunch of technology that just hasn't been brought to this kind of data. And what's I find unfortunate, which is why I'm super glad that you give us this opportunity to talk about it, is that there's a lot more effort put into the organization, discovery, and storage of tweets than there is to our laws.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
that's
says a
true.
lot. That says a lot about us as a society, not just Americans. I think this is a problem worldwide.
Worldwide. Yeah.
But what do you do? So how do you solve it? Do you have a team of people like digitizing all of these laws, or do you just sort of, set an arbitrary line and say, like, before this, we're just not going to have them digitized, and going forward we can?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a great question, and it's a question of resources. Typically, the first thing we do is embarrass people that this is not being done, and it's got to be done, right? So for a long time, there were not any good government websites that show the law or the bills in the United States. And so a bunch of small, scrappy companies started to put stuff online, and those became the places that people will cite to. For court records, you'll still go to a site called courtlistener.com, because the official court records are behind a paywall in Pacer, right? So there are all these scrappy websites. And then at some point, the government gets embarrassed enough that they'll set aside some funds to try and update things.
So that's what CEO really stands for, doesn't it?
Chief
Chief Embarrassment Officer.
Absolutely. That's great. And this is one of those industries where the right people to do this, or the right place for this to be done, is in government. But often government moves slowly. So you have outside entities sort of create an alternative, but we don't have the original source data. So then the government gets interested in doing it, and that's where Govable comes in. They'll create projects to say, okay, we need some help with this. And for example, the Government Publishing Office has done a really good job of digitizing. And as you say, they start with what's today and they've gone backwards. And unfortunately, because they just don't have the resources, the people who the focus of the backwards digitization is just to have it available and essentially in PDF, right? It's not structured data. You can't really get the hyperlinks. Eventually, we may enrich that parsing. From this point forward, they're actually publishing in XML, in structured data. And that's part of our work at Govable, is to help them to make the best use of that, so that once it's in that structured data, the diffs that we were talking about can be more pointed more specifically to what part of the document did you make a change in. Right. And so for now, and this is true in a lot of places around the world, for now, the backwards digitization is more about archiving and finding. You really can't do the kind of point in time research that you would like to do. From now on, if you catch it, you now can start. It's the equivalent of starting to put something in version control, right? If you have one commit for all your previous stuff, that's not going to help you do version control. But then from now on, we're trying to layer on top tools that let you go sort of deeper into things. Part of Andrii's job and work has been, every day when Congress is in session, they introduce new bills, right? Some of them aren't passed yet. Keeping track of those as they go through the process, and many of them are not going to get passed by Congress, but just to know who introduced it, where is that document, and people, as soon as it's introduced, people want access to it and want to know more about it.
Yeah. Just the sheer amount of data that must be coming in is kind of impressive, because some of these people, they talk a lot. So if they're tracking all that, yeah, wow.
Totally.
I feel, Andrii, I feel bad for you. So drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, there is a lot of documents and metadata attached to it. So processing that definitely interesting and challenging work. But also there is another hidden aspect of working in that domain. Well, first of all, data exactness is top priority, is a must. So basically it's very binary, be either valid and we good to go, or the comma not there and we invalid totally. This is very important stuff. But also, since I was working that domain, I discovered another hidden, I would say, even feature, because our clients, our end users, they actually highly trained professionals, they lawyers, and so it is very demanding crowd, but also they not just your regular users. So if they making a bug report, it's not your usual what, where, when. It is extremely detailed with context, with everything and everything. And yeah, it's just nice to work with such high trained professionals. You just feel like this thing matter, and this is very, very cool about this domain.
For some reason, the issues come through as like legal documents. It's crazy.
That's actually absolutely true.
It's like, who can read this? Only a lawyer. I can't make any sense of it. I cannot.
So when you joined Govable, were they just like, find some way to make this happen and visualize it all and maybe build a front end for it as well? And you were like, what?
While you're
Part
in there.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much to do to restructure the data. And so we sort of help, it's sort of a combined effort we help them brainstorm, what is it that you can do with this data? And Nicole, you were already grappling with it. Well, maybe we put it on blockchain, so sometimes the very first thing you want to do is introduce indexes and search, right? These, again, as Andrii is saying, these are very highly trained, knowledgeable people. They know where things are in the law. And so what they've done until now is they'll search for it by its citation, but not everybody can do that. And not everybody's mind is infallible. So by introducing indexing, you can help them discover what they're looking for better. Then linking the data, right? So you're writing a new document and you want to cite to an old document. You want to be able to bring up that old document really quickly so that you can cite it properly, copy and paste it, just introducing tools like copy and paste, right? Where before they would have a copy of the law in a book open to the side and have to rekey it, right? So part of the journey is looking at, like Andrii said, this very specialized domain and building developer tools for them, right? Another equivalent is building tools for developers, because we're creating the tools that help them do their main job. Their main job isn't software, but they're also not, scrolling TikTok. This is not an entertainment area. This is their main job. So they have had systems that worked before using, as I said, paper. So a lot of our stages are, okay, which of these systems on paper makes sense to digitize and how? And which ones, maybe you stick with the paper, we put that off into the future. And one of the areas that we've found is extremely valuable is when you're talking about large, like Paul was saying, large quantities of information and data, that these are also really patient professionals, but they appreciate that if you can take the 600 bills that passed in the last Congress and put them all on a table and let you search by the metadata about that, that's really helpful, and it's novel.
Yeah.
So shall we get into how you managed to, or you started to solve this problem, Andrii? Because it seems like there's a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot of there to discuss. Maybe I can show you a quick presentation
Sure.
to actually.
We love presentations on this show.
Yeah.
And I'll give you, I'll just give you a little preview of when Andrii says ETL pipelines. One of the things that we're doing is we start with a document that Congress produces, right? Typically a bill. And we have a number of stages of processing that document to enrich it and get more information out that we then can present to our users, right? So something as simple as the title, we need to gather that title information for each of the thousands of documents so that the users will have access to it in their tools. Sorry, Andrii.
So let me know if the presentation working. Do you see the next slide with my pretty face? Great. So another opportunity to introduce myself. So what I do, I'm developing, maintaining, supporting existing ETL pipelines, and ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. And we quite literal about it because we literally extract data, parse it, transform it in many ways, and then load to the cloud storages. And also there is a PagerDuty aspect where I need to keep an eye on things. To answer many questions and future questions about Grafana and stuff like that, visualization in general, first I need to give you some insights about the project that we have. Its characteristics, so they're gonna be more context about that. So it is a custom-made ETL pipeline. It looks like Docker Compose with bunch of services, and this is a very important characteristic that we have Dockerized, containerized application. And the main feature of this software is that core logic runs without any user interaction on a schedule. Well, there is user interaction when you schedule it and set up it for the first time, but then it just completely automatically doing its thing and produces the data. Another interesting thing that we're using MongoDB to store metadata about how we process stuff, what we gather. So it works quite nice for us because at the beginning there was this startup stage of the development where we were not sure what data schema do we want, so we add remove fields and it worked pretty nicely for us. The main output artifacts of the pipeline of the project, bunch of XML, JSON, PDF files. they processed in different ways and structure in some folder structure. So basically, it is very important piece of software that basically produces files, uploads it into the bucket, and then we have customers and users, some other applications and subsystems, sometimes much more larger than ours, that actually rely on the data. They expect data to be correct, processed in timely manner. So it's like instant feedback when something missing, because user in the front end will say, okay, it is released in the official source, but it's not in our system. What's going on? And this is actually lead us to the actually problem that we have. Yeah, so life happens, and sometimes certain items didn't get processed. And because by the nature, the application is just a faithless machine that just running in some remote server, finding what's and why we didn't get the process item requires a lot of effort. First of all, I get tagged in GitHub issue, and then I start my journey where I scout logs, where I start looking at file system. Do we have the data? I start querying MongoDB, and then I present my report saying, okay, yeah, we have problem, something not right.
I'll just give a little context to this, if you don't mind, Andrii.
Yeah, sure.
Congress, as I said, is introducing bills all the time, and they go through a lot of stages of processing in Congress. They go to a committee, the committee reviews it, and it's often not clear of the thousands of bills that are introduced, which ones of them are going to move through their system and actually get passed. We're now in a stage where we're not even sure the main budget bills are going to get passed by Congress, right? And those are the things they have to pass for the US government to continue. So there, in some ways, you can look at this as thousands of distractor bills, lots of data that's coming through that's not going to go anywhere. One of those bills gets passed by Congress yesterday, and now that becomes really critical for our customers, because our customers are the ones who analyze those bills and tell the rest of the world where the parts of the bills are going to go into the law, and then they start restructuring the bill into the organized code of the law. Well, so that as soon as it gets passed, our system starts processing that bill, transforming it to a new JSON format, extracting information from it, and ideally we'll put it up on our customer's dashboard by the morning. And the customer gets there in the morning and it's not there. And which stage of the 6 stages of the pipeline did this break in? So go ahead, Andrii.
Yeah, and another challenge and problem that there is no visibility for all the team members, because, well, only backend developers can query and scout the logs, and basically it is a bottleneck when you need to ask a person, hey, can you update that issue with problematic items and stuff like that. And on top of that, at the time, we didn't had very robust functionality to actually rerun the whole pipeline for single or batch of items. So for the users, it was the key missing functionality that we actually needed to implement. And that lead us to a journey to actually find a solution for that problem. And so from the beginning, we had this vision of some sort of front-end app that would basically in very table view visualize all the data in our MongoDB, so we can see how much items we have in total, how much processed, non-processed, with links to various documents and stuff like that. So internally, we started discussion and finding options. How do we implement such app? And our initial thought was like, okay, we have a front-end team. Why don't we ask them? And we can do that, but every approach has its own pros and cons. And asking front-end team to do that, pros, well, it will be done. But the con for us, because of heavy load of the team, they will treat this project as side project, and so development may take months and weeks. We're not even sure when it's going to be done. Another option, and this is like very naive solution from me as Python backend developer, we can actually build without JS and stuff like that, very simple Flask application, basically static pages. So imagine HTML page with a table, but that solution also have its own pros and cons. Pros is that we can do that without any help from other teams. The cons that it's gonna be static, not very pretty, and stuff like pagination, filtering also will take a lot of manual stuff and work to do. But another,
we're talking about a sort of a list of 20,000 documents. So we really, we can create a 20,000 item table, but that's a whole lot of scrolling.
Yeah.
yeah, just imagine a table with 20,000 rows, and how do users will navigate through that? And so this is like also a problem, a solution for us, because if we implement pagination like with very small batch of items that we load, it's not going to be very insightful for a user, because you can search and filter within that, for example, 100 bills. But if you load whole Congress, like 20, 30,000 items, it is very insightful, but yeah, try to navigate that. And so one of my senior teammates, he was actually working on a project that used Grafana in OnStack, and he gave us advice that, hey guys, why don't you research Grafana? Great tool for constructing that vision that you just described. And this is how our journey with Grafana begins.
Yeah. And we should give a shout out to him. Alex is probably watching now. Alex Boyko.
Yeah. Hello, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for the
So
song.
Alex is your big fan,
Yeah.
Paul and Nicole.
Oh.
He has worked on a number of Grafana projects, and when he first brought this to us, I was like, another tool, because I got to tell you, we've got this Docker Compose with, 6 or 7 different containers, and we're like, another container for this? Is it really worth it?
What did you think, Andrii, when it was brought up?
Yeah. So another thing that we need to talk about when we describing our internal thought process, we need to keep in mind that we're talking about real life software development. And this is not some vague, just theoretical SDLC. So in real life, the time is the essence. And so you can say, there is great technology, I will investigate it for a week, see you guys next Friday. That's not gonna work. And also, there is backlog of features, bug fixes, stuff to investigate. And so when you introduce new Epic Jira issue, that new item must compete with other stuff. And so we know that we need our key functionality to actually reprocess items, but we were missing the key part, like how do we efficiently get to, for example, web form to actually do that. And so this is one of the first tasks that I was given, to actually investigate Grafana as technology. Is it applicable for our project?
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, it is. So,
and sorry, I'll jump in one more time, Andrii, which is
sure,
that
go ahead.
we have, with all of our projects that have this kind of a pipeline, we have a choice. We can look at the logs, which is what often people want to do. And so you take the logs and you'll put them in a like an Elasticsearch or something like that. And so you can see where things went wrong through the logs. Or what the approach we've used with Grafana, you look at the outputs. So there's an output at each stage of a different kind of document. And in the Grafana tables, so we may not get the log output of like what the error was, but we get whether it got to this stage, whether it got to this stage. For us and our customers, we decided that that was much more useful because they're outcome driven, right? Our users don't care about logs so much.
Yeah, and one of the first tasks that I was given to actually investigate Grafana, and because very important characteristic of our project, we have Dockerized containerized project with Docker Compose. And so when there is issue like investigate that technology, there is always that line where on the left we have technology not Dockerized, containerized at all, and this is instantly a whole set of challenges. Do I need to create a new container for that? Who's gonna update those CVs in 6 months? Maybe I put that technology in existing container with, I don't know, Node.js. Will be there conflicts and stuff like that. And so when something not Dockerized, containerized, it is like very bad for us. And there is actually other side of coin where I would call it over Dockerization, when you're researching technology and there is small Docker Compose with 15 services, Kafka and stuff like that, and you're like, oh wow, that projects look way bigger than our original project. So what's the play here? Do we merge Docker Composes? Do we create Docker networks to combine them? Like, what is the play here? And what I like about Grafana from the start, that Grafana has its own one single open source Docker image that's supported by community. Those annoying CVs in 6 months will be fixed in new image version. So it's like instantly removing a lot of headache for us. And so, yeah, I was starting poking around with it, and I was able to actually add it into Compose and see the Hello World dashboard pretty easily. I think the most challenging part was because we're using Nginx to actually add the configurations for right proxying, but it was also a pretty straightforward process. As I mentioned, we're using MongoDB, and I couldn't find free community plugin for MongoDB. And this is why we decided to actually go with API, REST API, to serve data to the Grafana. So we basically have very simple IP endpoints that query in MongoDB and passing data to Grafana panels. For that, we're using data source called Infinity. Here is the link. What I like about that, it is very easy to set up. I cannot recall changing anything in its own settings, but that because we have the Docker setup and we basically call in services within Docker network. And it is per panel customizable, so it's very easy to edit, for example, JSON file for a dashboard and change some stuff. And the most like powerful features that we get for free out the box, I would say pagination with absolutely zero effort, and filtering. And filtering is huge for us. Let me show you the next slide. It is a basic dashboard that we cook. So we have some pretty pie charts. I'm not sure. I recall to be hungry at the moment, so those pie charts looked very appealing to me. So I was like, yeah, be keeping that. Another thing, we have panel to see how much documents do we have. And also because Grafana Smart and have variables, we can actually have variables and pass data through and between panels. So it's like very customizable.
And what's hugely useful in this case, you'll see that that top panel shows the list of the congresses. So which group of congresses has which bills. So you click on one of those and that fills out the bottom table with the only bills from the latest Congress or the one that you want. And then you see also the numbers. We only have one bill from the 110th Congress a long time ago, but all of the others have a larger number of documents.
Yeah, and what was unexpected for us, we were starting worrying about pagination and how do we implement that, what chunk of data could be insightful for us. And so we tried to load the whole Congress. It is 20,000-30,000 of documents, and Grafana can handle that pretty easily. It is 15-20 seconds response from the API, but it just enormous amount of data to actually filter, get some insightful information. Each stage of the pipeline user can open to see, okay, that metadata was processed one time ago. What if I reprocess that now? And so this is how we basically combine visualization visibility that Grafana provides with functionality that was required for us, because there is a specific column with a link that leads to a pretty form that user can actually reprocess stuff. And it was huge because now I get tagged into GitHub issues, but I see users discuss problems with screenshots from Grafana dashboards. And previously, it was required for me to query MongoDB, find the logs, update issues. And so I was the human bottleneck that basically slow the process down. And now, and it is especially important because of the internationality of the team, time zones. I hate when it's Wednesday. I get a message in my evening. I respond, and it is next day. The person actually can respond to me.
Yeah.
And so it's 2 or 3 messages or 2, 3 correspondence, and it's next week already. And so it is very huge for us that team can have a shared place where they can go and actually interact with data, see the insights, and this is huge for us.
Yeah, it's so cool to see these custom uses like that, because I mean, I can't imagine when Torkel and Co created Grafana initially that they would envision that they would have that foresight and vision to see that people are taking this product, this dashboarding product, which was mainly meant for, like, people like SREs and that, to see their metrics on a low graph and things like that. But that this platform is actually being used as a application front end, and was able to be done quickly just by virtue of having these plug-in data sources where you can point to your MongoDB and have these custom queries being displayed. So that's, I mean, kudos to you guys for checking that out and investigating that, and then actually making it work. And kudos, of course, to the development team for making it flexible enough where you could do that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for the, first of all, open source community, because I know that in 6 months, when we will scan our images and find bunch of bad CVEs, I will just update image version and get rid of most of them, and it is huge time saving for us. So relying on such huge open source projects, it's very, very beneficial.
Yeah.
Another slide that we have, it is kind of wish list for us to provide maybe a little bit more feedback. So we have very, I would say, unique setup, because everything must be provisioned for us. And I'm saying like everything. So we have repository where we store our dashboards, but also we have very remote environments where we don't have access, and so we have to ship the whole project there. And so we cannot say, just log in as admin, go to that URL, click that checkbox. It's not an option for us. Everything must be fully provisioned. For that, we did a little monkey patching, but one of the wish list for us, if we could provision not just dashboards, but every single aspect of the application in some YAML JSON files and stuff like that. Also, we rely on environment variables a lot, and so Grafana have actually a lot of those. And part of the problem that I couldn't find like a single place where we have environment variable, what's the default value, what is the description, in one single place for all of them. So I think that would be very beneficial. And last point would be, because when you're working with new technology, you Google it a lot, you searching, and when you see that search input in the docs, and this is actually existing environment variable, let's find it, and there is 2000 matches, and you're like, wow, it's very, very popular environment variable.
Right.
But you visit 10 links, Control F, and no matches. You're like, so I know searching is hard, but I think this is one of the areas that would.
So now, guys, you're getting our bias, where documentation is a kind of structured data like law, and you're getting what kinds of things we would want to do with the whole web, right? So you have documentation, it's describing the outline of your product, and immediately you start to have these problems where even in a tech company, you haven't fully translated all of the documents into as friendly a web form as you could have.
Documentation is hard.
It's hard.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, there's always, it seems like, very focused efforts on trying to get the documentation up to snuff. And, and then, of course, like Andrii was saying, with all those environment variables and that, it's like, yeah, I guess it's a good problem to have in a way. Maybe it's just a testament to the configurability. But yeah.
Well, and then on the flip side, we were able to do that. I mean, we love talking to you guys right now, but we were able to do this all without direct support because the tools are pretty straightforward. They are easy. We had some workarounds. We would love an official supported plugin for MongoDB and other data sources, but it was so much easier for us to do this than to build something custom, and that would have taken our whole focus. And as Andrii was saying, those filters are incredibly powerful because there's whatever your data is, if you know what category it falls under, like a lot of our documents, if they haven't been processed, we have a not found field. So you just search by not found and it'll pull out the few documents that aren't processed.
Yeah.
So Alexander, sorry, go on, Andrii.
Yeah, very important feature. I'm very glad that it just goes out of the box with zero efforts. Every battery is included, and yeah, it's very beneficial. I would describe this whole thing as backend developer friendly as front end, where you basically customize it with YAML and JSON files, and it just works.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're actually working on making that better. There's a whole project of dashboards as code as well. Everything we want to shift everything into that kind of format so that. Yeah. Well, you were talking about your wish list, right? Of also having the roles configured and all that, and having that be fully provisioned just from a Docker image.
Yeah. There's one other thing Andrii had brought up that I think is really useful as a direction to go, which was when we created these dashboards, first we visualized, but then immediately we want to do something with that data. So there's an item you find and now you want to reprocess it or rework with it. And we created our own solution where you go from that to an action dashboard where you fill in a form field and then take a post action. It'd be super useful to have action buttons or some kind of way of translating from the visualization to now doing stuff.
So I think I might have mentioned this during our initial chat, but the scenes framework is going to be really helpful on that front. I haven't looked specifically to see if they have a reusable component for buttons, but I think there's a very good chance because every app requires that. However, you would have to create your own app. But the scenes framework comes with a lot of these things already that people usually recreate so that you don't have to. So you're, in a way, you're just kind of bringing things into what you want rather than rebuilding it yourself.
And this is what I like about this setup a lot because it allows us, it gives us 95% of what we wish for and even more. Yeah. And then the rest of 5%, we can find other ways. So our way is just linked to a web form where we actually reprocess. And it turned out actually very great and beneficial for us. So I would say be open-minded, find different solution, because if I would be tasked to go deep and change, I don't know, some internal JavaScript or CSS files inside the actual Grafana, yeah, it would be a huge waste of time because I'm not proficient in JavaScript. But yeah,
Deep.
Yeah,
So,
actually, I was going to ask, do you have other things on it? Do you use any other parts of the Grafana stack for example, observability for your own backend infrastructure?
there is there is two things that we plan to actually interact with, and I'm very curious. First is logs. We
oh,
have a lot of logs, some of them 5
That's what I
gigabytes
was
log
going to
files,
suggest. Have you
and I
heard of
was
Loki?
yes, and I'm very curious how would Grafana behave if we load 5 gigabytes log file into it. So yeah, and another thing, I was listening to this podcast previously, and one interesting topic was traces.
yeah.
I'm not sure how exactly it would be applicable to very local Docker Compose setup, because we don't have distributed microservices, stuff like that. But having all the logs from all the processes and sub-processes and all the queues in one single place, it's sounds very appealing. So this is something that we have in our backlog to actually investigate and expand on.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I imagine, the UI for the traces to be like making those, where you had the document and those little margin comments saying,
Mm,
replace this, and then there
yeah,
you go, right there, boom.
that'd be
Yeah.
cool.
There's so much. There's so much to do. That I feel like we could have you guys back on to talk about
Right.
after you've discovered what you wanted to discover about Tempo and Loki. But
Mhm.
I guess that's going to be another
For a
episode.
future session. Yeah,
Yeah,
fabulous.
Yeah.
exactly.
We really, really appreciate the stack that you guys have built and the opportunity to talk about our unusual use case here.
Yeah, I also wanted to call out that if anyone who's watching wants to reach out to either really either Ari or Andrii, right? You can just go and reach out to them with these contact details, or you can go to Govable.ai
Thank
and
you.
reach out that way as well. For the next week, just actually very appropriately, I did have an announcement though. We just released distributed tracing with Grafana Cloud K6. It's like it just got released this week. It's now on Grafana Cloud for free. K6 is a load testing tool, and now it has tracing with Tempo built in. So any load test that you fire off, it'll go through your stack, and if it's instrumented with OpenTelemetry, it's going to be pretty easy to follow. I thought it was like a nice little segue there when you mentioned traces.
Absolutely.
so
Yeah,
next week, so next week I'm going to have another one of my colleagues on to talk about how to install Grafana on Kubernetes. It's going to be a
Oh,
very beginner-friendly episode, so come back for that. But
we're
thank
gonna
you,
have lots
Ari and Andrii,
to
for coming on, and thank you everybody for watching.
Yes, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Nicole.
Bye
Thank you,
bye
Paul.
and take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.